"2014. War erupts in eastern Ukraine. Shells rain down on Donetsk, a city that's home to nearly 1 million people. Among them, Vyacheslav Pinchukov, who we know as that kingpin of cybercrime, Tank.
We found a video from the 7th of August. It captures the moment a blast rips through his apartment and his young daughter's bedroom.
Let's scroll back. In the footage, I can see that there's heavy shelling, giant clouds of smoke. Then 2 more explosions as Tank's tower block takes a direct hit.
Tank told me about that when our producer and I visited him in prison in Colorado.
What you're about to hear is a summary of that conversation based on their notes, reconstructed with an actor.
My daughter's room was almost completely destroyed. It made me insane with anger.
His daughter was safe, though. Tank had taken the precaution of moving his family out of Donetsk when Russian troops first arrived covertly a few months earlier.
But the war, which has since become a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, would transform Tank's life and ripple through the shadowy world he came from.
Though he says he walked away from that world after the FBI raided his apartment back in 2010.
I started living a normal life, a more clean life. My life took a whole new direction.
He says he started trading coal.
It's plausible. Donetsk was coal country, a place of huge mines and steel plants.
I would get it at a good price and find factories that needed it.
But while Tank says he'd turned his back on crime after the FBI turned up the heat, someone else was building something even bigger than his old Jabba Zeus scam.
Criminals are using state-of-the-art techniques, seemingly drawn from science fiction movies, to take control of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of victim computers or bots.
As eastern Ukraine was plunged into war, in the US, top officials were warning of a new cyber threat, a new Zeus, more fiendish than the last.
Game Over Zeus was widely regarded as the most sophisticated criminal botnet in existence worldwide. From 2011 through 2014, Game Over Zeus infected between 500,000 and 1 million computers, and it caused more than $100 million in financial loss.
But if it isn't Tank running this new Zeus campaign, who is?
This is Cyberhack Evil Core from the BBC World Service. I'm Sarah Rainsford.
And I'm Joe Tidy.
Episode 5, Game Over.
Saturday morning cartoons, a ritual for many North American families, including FBI agent Keith Mulaskis. On screen this weekend in 2006, an 80s classic, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The heroes in a half shell.
My son was young at the time and we were watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I saw Master Splinter, who's like the sensei of the Ninja Turtles.
Master Splinter, a rat in a kung fu robe, gives Keith the inspiration he needs for a cybercrime case he's working.
And I'm like, I could spell Splinter with no vowels, like hacker speak. So I became Master Splinter, one of the world's biggest spammers.
Keith's going undercover to infiltrate cybercriminal networks, gather intelligence, and bring them to justice.
I wanted to be a spammer because really spam is kind of that seedy backbone of all nefarious activity on the internet. So you know, people send out text messages or email messages to try to get you to click on a link, which then spreads malicious code and downloads and gets people access to computers and networks. So by being that spammer, I could really talk to a lot of different people.
Special Agent Keith Mulaski, aka Splinter, also gets a fake Polish identity. He even travelled to Warsaw to familiarise himself with some of the landmarks in case someone asked.
He also comes up with a bogus background of past crimes to give him credibility on the criminal online forums he's tapping into. And he's working with FBI translators who help him read and respond to the many messages he's receiving in Russian.
He zeroes in on one particular forum, Dark Market, where he spends up to 15 hours a day building the myth of Master Splinter.
The FBI quietly starts making arrests and gets people to flip and feed false information into the forum.
So we would pretend to be business partners and they would say, hey, I vouch for that Master Splinter. He is a criminal. He's trustworthy. So I had a lot of good vouches. People would Google me and see I was one of the top 5 spammers in the world. So I had that credibility. And then I just did a lot of talking, I guess, social engineering to get people to believe my story.
Soon, Keith begins to expand his fake criminal resume.
I would pretend to sell credit cards, but we would get the credit cards from the bank. So they looked like they were stolen credit cards, and I would sell them, and then any losses on those cards, they really belonged to us, and we would pay those cards.
Did you ever have to break any laws?
We were able to get certain authority to break certain laws as part of our undercover authorities. But we would always do is we would always make somebody whole. So if there would be any loss, we would reimburse them for that.
As Master Splinter's credibility grows, the criminals he's embedded with start to give him new responsibilities. He becomes a dark market administrator.
I was one of the leaders of one of the big criminal forums at the time, and in order to sell on our forum, you had to be reviewed.
You need reviews because, turns out, there's not always honor among thieves.
There are a lot of scammers, even in the cyber criminal world. So if I'm going to spend $1,000 or $5,000 to somebody, I want to make sure that they're legitimate and that the product is legitimate.
Keith takes it upon himself to weed out scammers from Dark Market, which only builds his credibility further. He does it by offering reviews of new illegal products and services, which also gives him excellent intelligence about emerging threats.
One day, a hacker named Slavic pops up. He also goes by the alias Lucky12345, a name we heard in the last episode. Slavic is asking for a review. He says he's written a new piece of malware. Its name?
Zeus.
So Slavic reached out, I want to sell Zeus on the forum, and this was just a normal course of chat. And then I assigned a couple reviewers to him to review Zeus, and then he was able to market Zeus on the forum. At the time, I didn't really know that, hey, I was chatting with really one of the original godfathers.
But at that time, Slavic was a nobody. Master Splinter was the man. But Zeus, as we now know, would transform cybercrime.
Zeus became really the granddaddy of banking Trojans at the time.
Keith's time undercover lasted 2 years. In October 2008, the FBI announced 56 arrests worldwide based on his investigation. An FBI statement at the time said,
"What's worked for us in taking down spy rings and entire mob families over the years, embedding an undercover agent deep within a criminal organization, worked beautifully in taking down Dark Market."
Dark Market was gone, but Slavic, aka Lucky12345, the Zeus creator, was not among the people arrested. He was out of reach and still at large.
Zeus, too, was still running wild and continuing to catch on. It was doing well on several criminal forums, and in 2009, someone starts using it against American targets. Big time.
We know that story. It's the Jabba Zeus crew, the one broken up a year later after raids in the US, the UK, the Netherlands, and Ukraine.
The Jabba Zeus boss, Tank, got away. For a while at least.
And Jabba Zeus went quiet. But then,
around September 2011, we started seeing a piece of malware based on that Zeus code come into the wild.
The FBI starts seeing a fresh round of victims, again mostly small and mid-sized businesses.
a plastics company in Pennsylvania saw $375,000 vanish from its accounts.
And there was another company called Purvis Brothers that lost $86,000. And then there was another company called Ness USA that there was a $3 million attempt.
New victims to a malware crew with a new name.
Game over.
Game Over Zeus.
It was called Game Over Zeus because in the code, there was a line that said Game Over. So that's why it was named Game Over Zeus.
And with his time undercover now over, and Master Splinter sent into retirement, Keith found himself with a new case.
I led the team that went after Game Over Zeus.
It's the beginning of a 4-year operation. Keith comes to learn that Game Over Zeus is infecting hundreds of thousands of computers worldwide and following a familiar pattern, capturing bank details and redirecting wire transfers to Russia and Eastern Europe.
From a victim's perspective, it's very similar to the old Zeus. The real difference is what's going on behind the scenes. The original Zeus was centralized. Every infected computer had to check in with a few key servers, central computers, to receive instructions. Take out those servers and the operation collapses. Game Over Zeus is much more robust.
What made this piece of Zeus different was it used peer-to-peer infrastructure.
In other words, instead of basing the operation on a few central computers, it was utilizing all of the hundreds of thousands of computers infected with the Game Over Zeus code. What's more, these computers could talk with each other, creating a criminal bot army. The hackers still used centralized servers, but they're not such a weak link anymore. If authorities take out a server, the network survives because instructions can hop from one infected machine to another. It makes it orders of magnitude harder to kill.
But those behind the operation still need central places to communicate. And here, Keith Mularski gets lucky. His team gets access to one of the hackers' servers and their online chats.
Now we start seeing nicknames. We see Slavic, we see Lucky 1234, we see Aqua. So we see a lot of the same names that were in Jabberzeus.
Aqua, now there's a familiar name. One name that's not there is Tank, Vyacheslav Penchikov, the Jabberzeus boss.
Maybe he really had quit cybercrime for coal.
Keith found no evidence that Tank was involved with Game Over Zeus, but from the chats, he was starting to see how this new group worked.
This was kind of like Al Capone's ledger book, so it would be like this wire transfer done by Aqua from this company in this amount. Now you're able to say, okay, this is the person that was responsible for that.
Keith already knows the identity of Aqua thanks to the work of his fellow FBI agent, Jim Craig. It is, allegedly, Maxim Yakubyets.
Now we're like, okay, well, these are the same guys that were in the Jabberzeus. Now this is their new thing.
Keith says Maxim is doing the same job he did for the Jabberzeus crew. He's the cash-out guy, transferring stolen money to Russia and Eastern Europe. And it's a lucrative role.
But rather than take out one player, Keith has a bigger end goal in mind. He wants to knock Game Over Zeus offline entirely.
The malware is unprecedented in its sophistication, so the plan to beat it needs to be even more so.
Keith and his FBI colleagues start coordinating with authorities around the world.
Police in Germany, Japan, Australia, France, Canada, Ukraine, and beyond all come together.
There's also a huge contingent of experts from private security companies and universities.
It was exciting because this had never been done before at this scale.
Together they come up with a plan. Someone has an audacious idea.
Hey, we think that we could take this over.
The idea is to redirect all those infected computers. Right now, they're taking orders from the criminals. Keith and his international team of experts think they can change that and get the computers to take orders from them.
The operation starts on the last Friday in May 2014. They choose a Friday because Keith bets on the criminals being out spending their money, not hunched over their keyboards.
There are 2 operation centers, one in Europe and one in the US, and they're exactly like you'd imagine them.
You do have big screens up on the wall. You got a table around with people there with their laptops opening. Everybody's talking via instant message to different people to coordinate.
Investigators were already inside one of the Game Over Zeus servers, eavesdropping on the hackers' online chats. Now they execute the plan to take full control of it.
We had to have servers seized in the Ukraine and elsewhere around Europe and also in the United States to really kind of make sure that we were going to take this over the right way.
The criminals can easily set up new servers and continue sending instructions to their botnet.
Keith and the team need to step in fast with their own instructions. And at first, things look good.
We could see the computers, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, checking in of knowing, yes, we are taking this over.
But then, Slavic, the Zeus architect who had first asked Keith to review his software, suddenly pops up and starts fighting back, issuing his own new commands.
An intense digital battle begins as coders wrestle over who the infected computers will obey. The fight stretches round the clock and through the weekend.
There was a lot of pizza. There was a lot of Mountain Dew and Red Bull, I'm sure.
The hard work and long hours begin to pay off when Keith's team finds a crucial clue. They track the specific IP address of the machine controlling the botnet. That's the unique address every device on the internet has. And Keith's crew delivers the killer blow.
So basically make that IP address disappear from the internet so that now he could not reach his servers, which allowed us enough time to fully take it over.
So you kicked him out of his own computer, basically?
Yes, we did.
The battle is over. Every infected computer is now cut off from criminal control.
It was a winner-take-all situation.
And you did win?
We did win.
The following Monday morning, US Justice Department officials break the news.
I'm pleased to report that our actions have caused a major disruption of the Game Over Zeus botnet.
This is Leslie Caldwell, who was Assistant US Attorney General at the time.
Over the weekend, more than 300,000 victim computers were freed from the botnet. We expect that number to increase as additional computers are powered on and connected to the internet this week.
At that point, that's kind of when you're like, okay, let's pop a little champagne, smoke the cigar type thing. Now we've announced it, we've done all of our work, and it's complete.
Not quite. While Keith and his team have pulled off an amazing heist of their own, wrenching the botnet from the criminals' grasp, they make 0 arrests.
But they did reveal a name.
Evgeny Bogachev, a Russian national, has been indicted in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for his role as an administrator of the Game Over Zeus botnet.
Yevgeny Bogachev, aka Slavic, aka Lucky 12345, the alleged creator of Zeus. He's never traveled to the United States to answer those charges, and today it's believed he's living in Russia.
He's the hacker that Keith got to know when he was working undercover as Master Splinter. A big deal to name him, for sure, but he was the only one.
Aqua's identity remains a mystery, at least publicly. Privately, as we heard last time, the Russian security service, the FSB, had already told the FBI that they'd identified Aqua as Maxim Yakubets.
Russia at that time went out and said Yakubets was Aqua. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to use that stuff from Russia in a U.S. court because we didn't think that the FSB was going to come and testify in a U.S. court.
Keith was right to be cautious. Russian FSB agents have never testified as prosecution witnesses in an American court. And at the time of the takedown, political tensions from Russia's war in Ukraine were making cooperation even more difficult.
So that's the difference of intelligence and evidence. You have the Russians saying that this is that guy, but they weren't going to testify. So we couldn't use that as evidence, but that was really great intelligence.
The Game Over Zeus criminal campaign went on for 4 years. During that time, American authorities say it led to more than $100 million in losses. In the annals of cyber investigation, its takedown was historic.
But with the hackers still at large, was it really game over for the Game Over Zeus crew? One member in particular had been waiting on the sidelines long enough, paying his dues, serving bigger bosses. No longer content running money mules, he was ready to make his own mark and become the main man of his own gang.
Yakubets' vision took things to the next level, and that's what makes him so special.
While FBI agent Keith Mularski and his team were busy taking over servers, something else was brewing. The hackers were adapting, evolving, and at that time, 2 new innovations emerged that would rewrite the rules of cybercrime.
A new piece of malware captured it all in one name: CryptoLocker.
Crypto, for the currency victims would have to pay out.
Locker because it locked up everything on your computer. Photos, files, passwords, all the stuff you can't live without.
And Keith Mularski says it was the brainchild of his old nemesis, Yevgeny Bogachev, aka Slavic. A new tool he deployed in the final months of Game Over Zeus.
We had hundreds of thousands of infected computers with Game Over Zeus, but they were only going after small to mid-sized businesses, which left hundreds of thousands of computers that they just weren't using.
Game Over Zeus had seized all these computers, but it was only milking money from some of them. From a criminal perspective, that is wasted potential.
So how do you turn idle computers into money-making machines? Answer: ransomware. CryptoLocker had the potential to hold your entire digital life hostage.
And what he decided to do was, hey, I'm going to push CryptoLocker out to infected Game Over Zeus computers, just to infect like Keith Mularski's computer or your computer, and I'm going to charge a couple $100s for the ransom. You know, it's less than getting a new computer, and in 3 months he made $20 million.
$20 million in 3 months. With Jabba Zeus, Tank said he would pull in $200,000 a month. According to Keith, CryptoLocker was pulling in $200,000 a day.
And demanding payment in cryptocurrency means no money mules, no messy money wires, just instant anonymous cash.
The profits were astounding, if short-lived. When the FBI killed Game Over Zeus, CryptoLocker went down with it.
But Keith says the Zeus money mule man, Maxim Yakubets, wasn't done yet. Perhaps he'd learned a lesson from CryptoLocker, seen its potential and a way to take cybercrime to the next level, this time with himself at the head of the table.
Yakubets said, why go after small, mid-size? Let's go after corporations. Let's do big game hunting. Instead of trying to get $100,000 out of a bank right now, which is getting harder and harder because the banks are stopping wires. You have to recruit money mules in order to get that. Let's just go full-blown ransomware. We get into a Fortune 500 company, we're going to encrypt the whole network and we're going to charge $1 million. That money comes directly to us. We don't have to split it with any group. This comes right in. So Yakubets' vision took things to the next level, and that's what makes him so special. That criminal mindset to go, okay, we're going to go from banking Trojan, which made a lot of money, but now how do we really now go to that next level? And then that's where it became a $1 billion industry.
Ransomware still needs a delivery system. CryptoLocker had Game Over Zeus. With Game Over Zeus now gone, the criminals needed a new network.
And it wasn't long before investigators started to see something new that had come to take its place: Dridex. But when Keith Mularski and the FBI dug into Dridex in some of the criminal chats, they saw something strange.
We started seeing ev17corp.biz. So like evilcorp.biz.
It's a domain the gang had registered to coordinate their operations. ev17corp.biz. And if you've ever tried to write words with your calculator, you can see how that spells Evil Core. It's as if they've hung a welcome sign on the internet declaring their name.
So they actually name themselves that, in a sense.
They name themselves, yes.
Because it doesn't take much to figure out that the word they're trying to spell is evil.
That's correct.
And so, in June 2014, even as the cigar smoke clears from the Game Over Zeus takedown, Evil Core is born.
And although they're not yet ready to share it publicly, investigations by both British and American authorities begin to build a picture of how Evil Core works. At its head, they believe, Maxim Yakubets.
No more playing second fiddle.
Now we start looking at them as an organized crime group. Now we start going from looking at the technical aspect to start focusing on the person. So let's start looking at social media. Let's start looking at property records. Let's start looking at things like that. Who are known associates in real life to Yakubits? And then that's where you start really laying out that organized crime group and trying to find out as much as you can about them.
British authorities say they're a tight-knit group, socializing together, along with their wives and girlfriends. They even holiday together.
They really viewed themselves as the new mafioso. They ran their operations out of the back of an Italian restaurant in Moscow, in the back room, just like you would see Tony Soprano do. So they really got into that whole mindset that we're the new mafia, and even on their cars, they would have personalized license plate that said Vor, which is Russian for thief. So they were very proud of who they were.
They perhaps had criminal reason to be proud. From its launch in 2014, British authorities say Evil Corp's malware, Drydex, would go on to become one of the most prolific and successful malware strains in the history of cybercrime.
It's alleged Evil Corp developed other malware and ransomware strains that would flood the internet in the coming years, causing hundreds of millions in damage, disrupting lives, and at least one dinner date.
In 2017, Kevin Robertson is out with his wife when his phone rings.
I was in a pub. Genuinely, it was about 10 o'clock at night when I got a phone call.
His wife rolls her eyes.
And she was a bit like, oh, not again type thing, because this is not the first time.
Kevin's an engineer who's professionally wedded to cybersecurity. First with the Royal Air Force, then later he helped prevent hacks at the 2022 World Cup. Today, he's Chief Technology Officer at a private security firm called Acumen.
On the night he's at the pub, he's working for the American firm Cisco, a tech giant with blue-chip clients for whom he's often on call at any hour of the day.
Kevin steps outside to take the call. It's a client, a financial institution he can't name. They've been hacked, and they're being held to ransom.
Ransomware encrypted every single one of their servers, about 700-800 of them in one go.
It's a breathtaking attack. He also learns, in this quick telephone briefing, that everyone's passwords have been reset. None of the more than 50,000 staff can log in. Some couldn't even get into their offices. Their electronic key cards were locked out.
In effect, a multi-million-dollar global company has been taken hostage at the click of a mouse. It is the worst attack Kevin has ever seen.
They were very much telling the organisation, we've effectively owned your state, as they would call it.
So much for that dinner date. They settle up the bill and head home. Kevin goes to his desk.
My wife went and made me some food and brought it to my desk. She knew what was coming. She knew I wasn't going to sleep that night.
Kevin joins a video call along with 50 colleagues. It's a virtual war room where they're going to work out how to get the company back online. Some are saying the firm will lose more than $1 million every day that its computer systems are being held hostage.
I know it's the worst day that this business probably has ever faced, but for me, this is where you get to shine and show, what you enjoy. I guess it's a little bit like a firefighter putting out a burning building. That's what they've trained for, right? So that's exactly how I felt in that moment, and I felt like even though everyone else is losing their heads, this is what my career in a way has been leading up to.
Kevin is handed responsibility for getting the company back online. His team set to work. When did this attack start? How did the hackers get in?
It can be hard to know where to start because big financial companies are constantly under attack. Most are thwarted.
Most.
Threat actors will keep having a go, keep having a go, keep having a go. There was probably 10,000 different attempts to get a foothold, and they only need to have it work once to have a foothold.
That had happened 2 weeks earlier. 2 people in the finance department clicked on an Excel spreadsheet that came in a spam email. The email deployed malware, which is soon identified as Drydex.
Drydex. The very same British and American authorities say was being run by Evil Corp. Drydex has the power to put ransomware on a computer.
At this point in time, we had no evidence to say who it was, other than we knew what the malware variant was, so we had a pretty good idea it's either Evil Corp or someone copycatting them, but that's all we had at that stage.
There's a potential third explanation. American court papers allege Maxim Jakobets had proposed to lease out Evil Corp's malware to other criminals. The cost, $100,000 up front, plus 50% of all revenues, with a minimum payment of $50,000 a week.
Very enterprising. So the Excel spreadsheet could have been Evil Corp, or it could have been someone else.
At that point, yes. Kevin was aware of the dodgy spreadsheets being clicked on, but he thought it was all cleaned up.
And everything seemed fine for 2 weeks, until that night in the pub when the criminals decided to strike.
The business was still trading until someone basically pressed the big red button that did two things: deployed the ransomware and executed it on the majority of their servers, and then, just for good measure, reset every single person's password so they couldn't log in.
Now, Evil Corp itself moves up his list of suspects.
We were very aware of them in 2017, yeah. They were starting to set the blueprint for other groups in terms of how they would go about monetizing the way that they did things, and so they were very much kind of top of the list.
So once Kevin is back at his desk, out of the first of the war room meetings, he sees every single file is encrypted, and they all have the same file extension, one that's associated with Evil Corp.
That's how you kind of know straight away what it is.
But there is one file that's not encrypted, the ransom note.
It was on every single server. There were contact details in there. There was reference in there to Evil Corp, and that's how we worked out exactly who it was.
Kevin says the ransom note demanded £10 million, $13 million, though he wasn't directly involved in the negotiations, and says he isn't sure if any money was paid.
It took 2 weeks for the victim company to get up and running again, and 6 months before everything was back to normal.
Even if it didn't pay a ransom, the cost to the company was enormous.
I'd say somewhere in the region of conservatively 20 to 30 million, I would say, probably in terms of total loss to the business, yeah.
Because someone clicked on a Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much as simple as that, yeah.
If we're charting the history of cybercrime, this 2017 attack puts us squarely in the new age of ransomware. It's an age we're still living in and suffering in today. Precise losses and damages are hard to come by because many victims, such as the British company Kevin helped, never go public with news of these attacks or whether or not they pay the ransom. But I cover this topic day in, day out, and the range of targets is astounding. It's not just companies and financial institutions, it's hospitals, police departments, schools, universities, charities, local authorities.
Basically any organisation with a computer, right?
Yeah, and the sums lost have gone from millions to billions.
And this new boom brings an old name back into the frame, Vyacheslav Penchukov, aka Tank.
I just decided it was the fastest way to make money.
Tank, the Jabazus leader who eluded the FBI in 2010.
The payouts are not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions.
After the Jabazus takedown, Tank said he went straight, turning to coal trading to make a living. Years pass, and one day, his phone buzzes.
I got a message from a friend who saw that I'd been put on the FBI most wanted list. I thought I'd got away with it all. Then I realized I have a new problem.
Tank does a search, and sure enough, there's his face on a poster, most wanted writ large in red and white. It says he's been charged by a grand jury for his role in the Jabazoo scheme.
Tank immediately contacts his lawyer. The advice? Don't worry. Just don't travel outside Ukraine or Russia and you'll be fine. American authorities can't really touch you here.
But it's not that easy for Tank. Ukraine has changed since his Jabazoo days. Back then, he told us,
I knew any problem I could fix. I knew how things worked in my country. Had a lot of connections, which could be helpful.
In those days, he was best friends with the president's son. By now, Yanukovych has fled to Russia, overthrown by a popular uprising.
So, if Tank was getting any special protection, which American investigators suspected, that is truly gone.
So what happened?
Well, this is what he told me when I visited him in prison. After the FBI put his name out, claiming he'd stolen millions, he starts to notice people following him. Then there are knocks on his door. He says officials began pressing him for money, and they weren't asking nicely. He felt really squeezed and scared. So he talks it over with his wife, and they agree the best way out is to pay up. And that's when Tank decides that means jumping back into cybercrime and into ransomware.
I picked up from where I left off. I still had my credentials for the criminal forums and found a few old connections.
Such as Maxim Yakubiets.
Well, no. And interestingly, he still refers to him as Aqua.
Aqua was still active when I came back, but I didn't talk to him.
Wasn't he an old friend?
I wasn't interested in him as a business partner.
He didn't say why, but he did say the cybercrime battlefield had changed.
In the beginning of the 2000s, we didn't have any resistance. Now, you have enemies. There are antivirus companies, white hats.
White hats?
The moral opposite of cybercriminals, people with high technical skills who lurk online to thwart people like Tank.
Cybersecurity had improved a lot. Now, a regular working day for a cybercriminal can last 10 to 12 hours. You have way more to do. The work became more sophisticated. It's harder, but the profits are greater.
Was it intimidating?
No, it encourages you. You need to be more inventive.
Tank quickly became a leading affiliate of various ransomware services, including Maze, Egregor, and the prolific group Conti.
This means he was renting a malware package from hackers and running the attacks himself.
I wanted the best malware, the best phishing campaigns, the best partnerships.
He said at one point he had control of 150,000 infected computers. His job was to figure out the best way to mine them for money, including holding some of them to ransom.
And he follows the model British and American authorities say was set by Maxim Yakubiets and his evil core.
I was looking for high revenue businesses, high scale, companies on the up. The bigger the company, the better.
Tank says it wasn't long before he was back making $200,000 a month.
For context, the average Ukrainian salary at that time was about $400 a month.
It was very profitable. Profits from ransomware were raised to the sky.
While Tank was celebrating, his victims clearly weren't. American court papers show he was part of a ransomware attack on the University of Vermont Medical Center in 2020.
They say this took out 5,000 computers and left the medical center unable to provide many critical patient services for more than 2 weeks.
No one died, but prosecutors say the attack created the risk of death or serious injury, and it cost $30 million to put right.
I asked Tank about this, and he gave me a very different story. He said he actually had nothing to do with this attack. He claims he only admitted to it to reduce his sentence.
In any event, Tank's return to crime seemed to solve his money troubles. The FBI later found a spreadsheet that suggested he'd made almost $20 million in 2021 alone. A year later, in February 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin launches a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And Russian troops make a dash for the capital, Kyiv.
When we talked in prison about this period, Tank got very animated.
I felt the missiles. Boom, boom. I spent 6 days in my neighborhood. I didn't know what to do. Kyiv was almost surrounded. It was like an apocalypse.
Tank's wife and children headed to Geneva, Switzerland, 2 days before the invasion began, a time when many Ukrainians were getting scared and leaving the country. Tank himself stayed on in Ukraine for a while. But just as his fatherly pride had led investigators to him in the first place back in 2009, his family connection again would lead to his downfall.
October 2022. After 7 months of all-out war, Vyacheslav Penchikov, aka Tank, one of the FBI's most wanted, left Ukraine. He'd done it once before, a quick visit to his family, but this time felt different.
Flying to Geneva, I knew I was going to be arrested. Maybe I wanted to be arrested.
But he glides through immigration again. It is a bit odd, because being on that FBI list means he should have been held there.
But he has changed his surname by this point, from Penchikov to Andreev. Maybe that helped. Or maybe there was a bigger plan in motion.
Tank goes to his family, but he's on edge. He thinks he sees cars following him.
After 2 weeks, his family's getting ready to move apartments.
I was heading out to buy clothes with the kids. We stepped out of the apartment and suddenly, there were cops all around us. There was even a sniper on the rooftop. They pushed me to the ground and put a bag on my head like I was Pablo Escobar.
That's the late Colombian drug lord.
I was so mad they did this in front of my kids. I'd been alone all morning. They'd clearly been watching me. Why hadn't they done it then?
Tank was finally arrested then in October 2022, more than a decade after the FBI's Jim Craig first tried to detain him in Donetsk. The following year, he was extradited to the US to face charges. And in 2024, he pleaded guilty to his role in the Jabba Zeus crew and multiple ransomware attacks.
I showed up on the day that he was sentenced. I was directly behind him in the back.
A familiar voice, that's Jim Craig, now a retired FBI agent.
We first met him when he joined the FBI. His first case was chasing Tank back in 2009. He stood in Tank's empty apartment in Donetsk. Now, he's finally seeing him in a Nebraska courtroom.
There was maybe 5 of us in the courtroom, aside from the lawyers, of course, and Penchikov himself.
What did he look like?
Very much older, much more gray, because he was quite young when we first started to get to know who he was. Now here we are, almost 15 years later. He looked pretty aged, which may speak to the fact that it's tough. He was obviously trying to manage a life of being anonymous and not being apprehended by law enforcement in any way, which can take a toll. He gained quite a bit of weight. He did not look like the young Vyacheslav Penchikov, aka Tank, that we originally saw back in 2009, 2010.
What was it like for you just seeing him in the flesh?
It was great. It was absolutely great to see him being held responsible for his actions.
What did he say? Was he repentant?
He did address the court, stating that he was sorry for what he did, that he didn't realize what an impact his actions actually had. But not for 1 second can anybody believe that. I mean, look at all the reporting from when the case initially started to the initial unsealing of the operation, probably from a lot of the information he received through individuals who were passing information over in Ukraine. So he was very much aware of the impact that this was having, especially in the United States.
The judge sentenced Tank to 2 9-year terms to be served concurrently. With the 2 years he'd already spent in custody, he'd expect to be out in 7.
He actually made the comment that he was happy that there was going to be some closure now, because he would call his son every night while he was sitting in jail, and his son would consistently say, "Daddy, when are you coming home? Daddy, when are you coming home?" And he never had an answer. So now he feels that there was some closure, because now he could tell his son, "I'll be home in 7 years."
Tank's criminal career spans more than 2 decades. It's a career that mirrors the evolution of cybercrime and overlaps with another name that investigators have long pursued, his former colleague, Aqua, aka Maxim Yakubyets.
But Aqua is in Russia, much harder to get at. So, in 2019, the FBI did to him what they'd done earlier to Tank, splashed his name on a most wanted poster and publicly aired their allegations.
We're pleased to announce a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest and or conviction of Russian cybercriminal Maxim Yakubyets.
Next time on Cyberhack Evil Core, Maxim Yakubyets and his family under the microscope, and their alleged close links with the Russian state. This This has been episode 5 of 6 of season 3 of Cyberhack Evil Core from the BBC World Service. We'd like as many people as possible to hear our stories, so please leave a rating and a review and do tell others about Cyberhack. It really does help.
Cyberhack Evil Core is a BBC long-form audio production for the BBC World Service. It's presented by me, Joe Tidy.
And me, Sarah Rainsford.
Thanks for listening.